Okay, so in this video we're going to use purchasing power parity to see how much a unit of a particular good or an item should cost in a different country given the exchange rate information. So here is our problem. If an item costs £75 in Britain and the exchange rate between the British pound and the euro is 1 British pound per 1.1406 euros, what will the item cost in euros in those countries in Europe who use the euro if purchasing power parity applies? Next, if tariffs, transaction costs, transportation costs, etc. are negligible, what could an enterprising business person do if he learned that the item actually cost 97 euros in European countries which use the euro as their currency? So what we're going to do is use the exchange rate and purchasing power parity to find what the price ought to be in euros. So the idea behind purchasing power parity is that once we have accounted for the exchange rate, the price of goods in different countries should be the same. So we know that the particular good or item costs £75 in Britain. And we also know that the exchange rate between the euro and the pound is 1.1406 euros per 1 pound. So if I know that the exchange rate is 1.1406 euros per pound, and I know that the item costs £75 in Great Britain, if purchasing power parity applies, once I've accounted for this exchange rate, I should know the price. So at this point, what you should do is you should pause the video and work out this multiplication, noting, of course, that the pound units, not the numbers, the units, cancel. So the pound units cancel, leaving us with euros as our units. So pause the video and find out how many euros this item should cost. Okay, so if you pause the video and worked that out by multiplying the 75 by the 1.1406, what you should have found is that the item ought to cost 85.545 euros in countries that use the euro. So that is what the purchasing power parity indicates. The item should cost 85.545 euros in countries that use the euro. Now, the next question is, if tariffs, transaction costs, transportation costs, etc. are negligible, what could an enterprising business person do if he learned that the item actually costs 97 euros in European countries which use the euro as their currency? Well, in this scenario, we've concluded that the item which costs £75 in Great Britain should cost 85.545 euros in countries that use the euro once we've accounted for the exchange rate. So if it's actually costing 97 euros, that item is much more expensive in Europe than purchasing power parity says that it ought to be. So being the enterprising business people that you are, what you would realize is that we could buy it where it is relatively less expensive, which is Great Britain, and sell it where it is relatively more expensive, which is the countries using the euro. And here's how that would work. So what you would do is you would buy the item, so buy the item for £75. Okay, so you buy the item for £75, and then what you do is you would ship it over to a country that was using the euro, and we would sell the item for 97 euros. Okay. So we sell the item for 97 euros. And then once I have 97 euros, we could exchange that. So exchange the 97 euros back to pounds. So if we did that, so we have 97 euros, what we need to use is the exchange rate. Well, if we know the exchange rate is 1 pound per 1.1406 euros, then what we could do is we could multiply that 97 euros that we now would have by 1 pound over 1.1406 euros. So if we work this out, what you would have to do, you'd notice that the euro unit would cancel, and that would leave us with a unit of pounds. You'd multiply through the numerators, so that would get you 97 in the numerator, and then you divide that by 1.1406. So if you work that out, you should get the number of pounds that you'll walk away with this from this deal with. So at this point, you should pause the video and find out how many pounds you're going to get. Okay, so if you pause the video and work that out, what you should wind up with is 85.04 British pounds. So in this example, what you would do if the item actually cost 97 euros, we concluded the item ought to cost, according to purchasing power parity, 85.545 euros. So the idea was to buy it for 75 pounds, ship it over to Europe, and the countries using the euro, sell it for 97 euros, exchange those euros back into pounds, and end up with 85.04 pounds. So we bought the item for 75 pounds and wound up with 85 pounds. Now, obviously, if we had things like transportation costs, transaction costs, tariffs, things like that, then it could create a scenario in which by the time we'd actually shipped the item from Great Britain over to Europe, that would take some money. And then by the time we dealt with some transaction costs and things like that, that might have further taken away some money. And then if we dealt with tariffs and so on. So it's possible that even if the item was selling for 97 euros in Europe, European countries using the euro, it's possible once we've started accounting for transaction costs, tariffs, and things like that, that you might not actually be able to make a profit by trying to do this. But if the tariffs, transaction costs, transportation costs, and so on are pretty much negligible, then basically you could buy it where it is less expensive, ship it to where it's more expensive, and make a profit overall. And that is how purchasing power parity applies to international trade a little bit, and so on. So at this point, I recommend that you find some other problems that are relatively similar, try those out, and see how you do.